Welcome to WebHack Meetup. This is the third month that we invite speakers talking about interviews. So before we start, I want to do a quick survey. So how many of you guys have experienced code review interview before? Please leave a comment in the chat. Okay, one. Okay, not so many. So I think that is the reason why you're interested in today's topic, because we all want to know how the code review interviews work. So yeah, today before we start, I will do, let me introduce today's schedule first. So we will have a quick introduction about WebHack. After that, we will have 25 minutes for our main talk today, and then we will have Q&A, and after that, it's for the rest of time is free talk with the presenters. And yeah, let me introduce a little bit about WebHack Meetup. Okay, we are a tech meetup based in Tokyo. We've been hosting this meetup for almost 4 years. We invite speakers from different technical backgrounds every month to give us different topics. And we also have a YouTube channel. So all the events are live streaming right now on YouTube, and the recording will be uploaded afterwards. So if you don't want to miss any interesting topics, please subscribe our YouTube channel. Okay, so so far we have more than 1,500 members join our meetup, and more than 2,000 attendances right now. Okay, and the reason why we can survive even during the pandemics is because we have a great community. There are many people who are interested in technical topics, and many speakers keep coming back to us when they want to share new topics. So if you also want to be part of us, you have some cool topics to share, and you're also waiting for a stage. Here is the link. Please just fill in the form. We will arrange a time for you for your talk. We are looking forward to have new speakers in WebHack. Can someone help me paste the link? Okay. Okay. Let me quickly introduce today's speaker. We're glad to invite Vicken. He's a staff software engineer at Indeed. He leads the interview training and has trained many interviewers over the years. So today he is going to talk about code review interviews from an interviewer's view. So without further ado, let's get started.
Cool. Thanks, Cenk. I hope everyone can hear me. Let me share my screen.
Yeah.
Cool. Can you see the slides?
Yes, I can see.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So thanks everyone for joining. And I hope I'm audible to everyone. And so let me start with today's talk, which is about code review interviews and my view about it as an interview. So most of you, as I think was indicated in the survey conducted at the start, was that would be new to this round and would probably not have seen this round earlier. So it's a quite interesting round, and just so I'll briefly talk about what's expected. So, but before that, let me start with my introduction. So I've been a software engineer at Indeed for about 5 years now. I've grown from a software engineer to senior, and then right now I'm staff engineer working on and leading the job applications product at Indeed. And I've led across, I'm the interview lead for multiple interview types, and I take a lot of rounds every week, ranging from coding rounds, code reviews, and project rounds as well. And I've conducted hundreds of interviews, and last check that stood at around 250, 300 interviews over the past few years. So yeah, I'll mostly talk about my experience as an interviewer and just general advice for interviewers and candidates, specifically to code review, and also a bit in a generic fashion. So at the end, we can have time if you want to ask me any questions and anything. So we can have some kind of free form discussions at the end. I want to start by giving a small disclaimer that this is not a presentation by Indeed, but a presentation by me as an interviewer, and just my personal account about my experience interviewing candidates and just my learnings there. And yeah, I'll of course share some implications and what's the expectation and how you can be more successful as a candidate and both as an interviewer. So, but before we dive into the coding interviews, code review interviews, let's just talk about what code reviews are actually. So for anyone who has been a software engineer in the industry won't be new to the concept of code reviews. Every place, even a startup or a big company, has some kind of process for code reviews. But in general, it is about having a second or a multiple pair of eyes before shipping out code to just ensure to get essentially feedback on what you wrote from your peers on the team, from different teams and other things. Again, this can take different forms depending on what the scale your organization is at, what are different processes. It could be pair programming, like person sitting next to you and just giving you feedback over the shoulder, just giving feedback on merge requests, your pull requests that you raise, or just a simple verbal or a document-based feedback. It can, and again, this varies from organization to organization. There is nothing, a universal thing about code reviews. And hence it can be a formal, it can be an informal thing. So depending on the organization, and we'll talk about it briefly in the coming slides. So, but let me also talk you through about why are code reviews important. So there are a few reasons why we place a lot of emphasis on code reviews. It improves a lot of learning and brings alignment within different teams and different members of the same team. It brings everyone on the same page itself. So suppose there are two developers working on a particular team and they want to just have a written record of discussions and a formal discussion about anything that you want to push through in our team. So code review is a great tool to make that happen and just bring everyone on the same page. And a reviewer gets a better understanding of author's code style, mindset, and generally how the code author works. And in the future, this also just brings harmony in the team to just learn more about how everyone just works together as an interviewer. So, and hence this is also a very effective coaching tool to provide technical mentorship and learn about best practices. So yeah, I think if you have seen this, you must have seen this very often, that whenever new members join a particular team, code reviews are the first experience they get through what you call an exposure to their code base. So they write something, and the first thing they do is generally create a code review. They get feedback, and also looking at code reviews from other members of the team, they get to learn about these things more and more. So as I said, this is a written record of the discussion which took place. So if suppose you want to go back in time and see why a particular piece was done or why a particular design was done the way it was that you can see today, you usually refer to code reviews in the past. And if done in a nice way, it usually gives a very good historical picture of how this particular piece evolved, So you can look at the history that is talking about, and you have these discussions and decisions in a written format. And this also is a means of sharing ownership and accountability for the code base. So it makes the author and reviewer empowered to feel that this code belongs to them, and naturally promotes that ownership. And in a remote working environment, which we are today, where most of us are working from home and just offices aren't really resumed just yet. So code reviews are also a great way to meet our peers. So we have been working from homes for about 2 years now. So I haven't met a lot of my team members, for instance, but I get to just talk with them, just have those water cooler discussions, and just the discussions which we used to have sitting on our desks, and just directly through these code review environments. So this also maintains that technical link, that link with their teammates, and just makes sure our team still is a team and not a group of peers just working together. And these points are very relevant and very important for us. These are something we and other companies who do code reviews. We are not the only company that does code review interviews, but there are a handful of them. But these are some of the points that are very, very strong in our culture as well. So who reviews this code? Usually, as I said, it's a shared responsibility, it's a shared ownership. So everyone is usually expected to, but it's also a sign of career maturity, I would say. So as you grow senior in your roles, as you grow from maybe a software engineer 1 to a software engineer 2 to a 3, you will start playing a more active role in reviewing code. So you would use it as a mentorship tool to mentor the junior members on your team, and just teach them. And also you're also an active gatekeeper for the code. So if you're more tenured and experienced in a particular area, in a particular code base, so you're naturally expected to just review code when others contribute to that. And hence,
Vivian, sorry for interrupting. I think there are many other people want to join the.
I think I allowed everyone. I allowed everyone in, I think. Yeah, I don't see anyone.
Is there a button called accept all?
Yes. No, I mean, there isn't anyone waiting. So I've been accepting everyone in. That's
so far. Okay. Then it's fine. Okay,
I'll actually make you a co-host too. So you can let yourself in yourself.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Sorry about that. Cool. All right. Pardon the interruption. Let me talk. And as I was saying, code review, being able to review code is a very important skill. It's a sign of career maturity. As you grow up, as you grow into your role, as you take more senior and more responsibilities, code review becomes an essential part of a software engineering job. And this is a very important skill, and something that we as a company and others in the company that feel very good about, and something that we think should be evaluated when interviewing for someone, when interviewing for a particular role. And because when somebody joins the team, this is a big part of how you work together in a team, and being able to review others' code and provide good feedback, and just generally have some good philosophy about what code review. So, and hence that's something I want to talk about in this talk. But first, a brief glimpse into just some of the interview philosophy that I and the company in general follow at Intermediate. So our number one priority, and something we don't want to, I would say, compromise at any cost, is the candidate experience. This is our number one priority, that whenever you or anyone as a candidate interviews with us, we want to provide them the best experience and help them succeed in the interviews. So this doesn't mean that we give away the solution and they always just pass our interviews and in them, but there is always a balance to strike, just to do handholding enough, and also gathering the signals that we want to get from the interview and evaluate them. But what we ensure is it's not a question answer session, it's more of a discussion, and our end goal is that both of us just learn something from each other and have an enjoyable discussion, so that at the end it doesn't feel like an interview. It feels like more of a discussion and something we collaborate on as a what do you call, as a as just the two people in the room. One of the big things that we ensure is try to keep it completely objective and reduce all the biases. We have multiple ways of ensuring that, and this is something we ensure at the company level globally across all sites. So we prefer having multiple interviewers in the room. So I mentioned two people in the room, but it's not usually not two people in the room. It's three or more than three usually, where one candidate and couple of interviewers. It's usually one interviewer who interacts with the candidate, but when we discuss after the interview, we always discuss that there are what did you think about the person in general. So this just makes sure that one interview is not just stuck on one particular thing that might have went very well or very bad, and just keep it, look at the holistic picture, keep it completely objective, and just don't be biased about a particular thing. So having multiple opinions always is a great thing, and every interviewer is expected to go deep training. We at Indeed, we don't just start interviewing out of sudden. We go through a proper training process, sit in multiple interviews, just lead multiple interviews with other people in the room to help you give feedback, other interviewers, and we constantly recalibrate across sites. So no matter you're interviewing for Tokyo or Singapore or India or US, the bar is completely kept the same, and all people, and for the same type of interviews, your performance will usually give you the same result everywhere. And that is something we ensure at the company level, that everyone is calibrated globally and everything. And one of the very good things that I think I love about the philosophy, and something I would always want to follow while interviewing, is we don't have access to interviews from other rounds till we conduct our own round. So if you, for example, just have a coding round before the code review round, I can't see the feedback for the coding round till my code review round is conducted. That means that no matter what their performance was in the coding round, my decision would be completely objective and not be biased about how they did in other rounds. So that is something that just helps a lot of bias. So you often see different kind of decisions, and that shapes our overall decisions too often, but that's something we promote a lot. And that finally brings me to code review interviews. So let me also talk about what. So the idea is quite simple, using code reviewing as a hiring tool. So we want to assess the candidate's skill and understanding in reviewing a particular piece of code. So there are a few parts of it, and I'll cover them in the consecutive slides. So and yeah, again, the goal is not to assess you in the tech stack or the language that we are working on. You are always free to choose what you work on. So for example, if Indeed works on Java or JavaScript, for example, in some products, we don't ask you to come up with just the entire knowledge of Java. Suppose if you work in Golang in your company, you're totally fine to choose Golang as a preferred language and review code in Golang within the interview. So the goal is not to assess you on what we want you to, but the goal is to assess you with what you are comfortable with. So you're given that freedom just to show your understanding about the language constructs. But the interesting part about the code review interviews is that it's not just about reviewing code. We also aim to understand your philosophy of code reviews, and where do you see code review fitting in your development? What do you think about code reviews in general? And usually, how do you review code in your company? So it's a combination of free form and structured interview, where a portion of it is you're expected to review a code that is relevant, piece of code that is relevant to Indeed and from our products. And the other part is more about your philosophy on code reviews, which is a free form discussion where we try to discuss like how do you do code reviews, or how do you work with your peers? How does code review help you collaborate, and those kind of things. So again, as an interviewer, the number one question that I had when I started doing this interview type is, hey, other people are reviewing this code, but as an interviewer, as anything I do in my career, there should be some benefit I get, even if it's in the long run. So there are a lot of benefits that I personally felt taking this particular round. And this is again something that you should always consider when introducing this round, for example, in your company, going forward, if you start doing this too. So because I have this free-form discussion in every round from candidates across, I don't know, hundreds of companies. So I get to learn about their processes that are developed across in their organization. So right now I'm the engineering lead for a few teams. So I know that each of the sub team under my organization has a slightly different process for code reviews. And this just escalates it to level further when we talk about different companies, different teams. So even for the same company, candidates from different teams just have different experience with code reviews. Different career levels have different experience of code reviews. So we get a lot of glimpse about how processes just work across the industry. And there have been several examples where I have just loved what a particular company is doing, and I have experimented with those processes in my organization. So that's a great learning that we have been able to bring out from this as an interviewer, I would say. So, and similar to processes, because the second part is more of a code review exercise, it's more, I would say, a hands-on thing. So you also get to learn about different languages. For example, if I'm working in Java 8 and somebody wants to review code in Java 11, I would learn about, okay, what new niceness how can this code be rewritten better in Java 11? And candidates give us feedback on that. And similarly, I get exposures to languages which I don't even know. Like I've never worked in Ruby, for example, but candidates review code in Ruby. So I get to learn about how constructs are similar yet different across languages. And I get a flavor of what's happening in the industry. And many times candidates just amaze me with just latest patterns or latest, what do you call, just some new features that come up with language every time. So I think that's been a great learning, and that's something that I've been able to adopt, I would say. And yeah, and again, as I said, we interview candidates across different levels and everything. So there would be many candidates which are way more senior than me, and some which are way more junior too. So there is a lot of difference in experience about and the approach in which candidates approach a particular code review, for example. So that approach style and just how they review code in general is also something that we as interviewers learn a lot. And yeah, but that also brings me to what things I've learned and what things I've just discussed with other interviewers about how to make interviews better, and something that has worked for me, not just for code review types, but other interviews as well. So the number one thing is having a structured prepare ahead of time. As I said, that a portion of code review interviews is free form, but what we usually also try is having a rough structure, having a rough list of maybe questions that we would want to ask on, like just discussing your views on code review. There would be some, before going into an interview, I usually have a mindset of reading either their resume or their experience about what kind of questions do I want to ask them. Again, it's not a fixed list usually for me, but it's just a rough structure to having some kind of leading questions in my mind. That always helps me personally. And yeah, I think adapting to candidates' answer and trying building a story. As I said, we focus on the conversational style of interviews a lot. So suppose if you're talking about some particular process, just continuing talking about a particular process and not abruptly shifting to something else because you had a list of questions prepared is bad for candidate experience. So we don't do that. I don't do that. And we as a company also don't. So as an interview, I always try to build a story in their process and just try to continue the question from where they left off their last answer usually. And I think the feedback about that has been strongly positive, and candidates always enjoy the interviews that I've been involved in. And having this rough structure also helps you time the interview. So in addition to the questions, I also have a benchmark, for example, like around 15-minute mark, I intend to cover this much question to track the interviews. And similarly, just benchmarking against this time check. I can either go deep into what we are discussing or just pull back. So as end result, it doesn't happen with us that, and at least this is something at least we try to, that interviews go like 30 minutes over the extended time. So having this rough structure or a mental check where we can adapt to candidates' time helps us finish interviews on time and still get enough evaluation signals that we want to get for the interview. And again, number one priority has for us has always been candidate experience, and finishing interview on time and respecting their time, because it might be middle of workday, especially in remote settings sometimes, where they are just interviewing in a lunch break, for example. So just respecting their time and just finishing it has been great for candidate experience too. And again, I covered this earlier, having a second opinion is always effective, reducing biases and ensuring objective results. So always prefer to have a shadow in the room too. And also a sign of career maturity, similar to code reviews, as you train other people on those areas of code, you always attempt to train other people on the interviews that you take. So your goal as an interviewer shouldn't be to just take the best interviews. It should always be to train others to take the best interviews, if possible. So as you grow further, just expanding that interviewing ecosystem is greatly helpful, not just for interviewing company, but also for a career, because that's also a great sign of career maturity, I would say. And again, this brings fresh perspectives. So more people come on board, they have their perspectives, something that you might not have thought of. And then this has been very helpful for me. Like after years of interviewing, even if I just train someone new today, there's always at least one or two things that are some questions which are very good and very thoughtful, and just really question about whether we are doing interviews the right way or asking the right questions, or should we change something. So that staleness is never come, and that calibration constantly keeps happening. Finally, I want to talk about what the candidates are expected to. So many of us are interviewers, but many of us would also be aiming to interview for companies that might do this round or similar round. Some of the learnings are common. So in the free form, I think one thing I would like to just clarify that in the world, there is no best process regarding anything, be it code reviews or be it releases or be it anything. So there is no right answer, I would say. So what is expected in this interview type is usually that you talk about what you would like to use or would you use, and the processes that work for you and your experience as you. And so it's not like an algorithm where you have to tell that, okay, this is a graph traversal that I will do and this will give me the answer. This is completely based on your experience as a code reviewer. And that's something that I think I would always encourage you, not just in code review interviews, but any kind of interviews you do. And of course, be very crisp and share your thought behind the answer. It's just giving the answer sometimes can be a bit risky, because the interviewer might not understand why you're going the certain way and might just assume a bad thing, let's say. So, and the expectation is that if you ever go through this round at Indeed or anywhere else, so just review code as you normally would. So just follow the same set of practices like you would do as looking at your peers code, and follow the same level of rigor. Just think about what would you do when you get a pull request, or just a peer asks you to just review their code. Just do the same way, and don't treat it as an interview, because that's what we are really looking for, like how you do code reviews. And again, look at code from all areas, just like you have what you call a code review from a peer. So you usually look for functional correctness, performance, maintainability, style, and those kind of things. So just evaluate and just look at the code from all areas, provide your feedback. That's the recommendation I would give you. Avoiding assumptions and always ask clarifying questions about requirements. So yeah, I think it's always, this is a general advice for any kind of interviews, that be it system design, be it coding, that hey, try to not have any assumptions. And if something that is not very clear, always ask a question about it. I think every interviewer, not just at Indeed, outside I have met too, is always appreciates candidates clarifying things rather than assuming something and going with it. So it's perfectly, and in fact encouraged to ask questions about the requirements, and crisply mentioning the feedback, and be it a feedback on the code review thing, or anything about in general like system design or anything. So leaving anything to open to interpretation is again harmful, because the interviewer might assume something else and might just think you're thinking wrong while you just were actually right, and because you did not state out your assumption correctly, this would be not great. So yeah, I think that was a brief glimpse into how code reviews in general work. Yeah, let's open it up for questions. I think anyone would want to ask.
Cool. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or join the talk, or you can ask your question in the chat. Neil. Invite.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Okay. Hi. Thank you for the insightful talk. I got one question. Is there any particular tool or what kind of tool you would recommend for the like code review interview? Like what's the criteria for providing a good experience of the code review interview?
Right. So in interviews, again, we have explored with different kinds of tools. We have explored GitHub pull requests, for example, directly to give code reviews. It has very nice commenting experience that you can explore. But HackerRank, in fact, also gives you a code review section. So it has an interview type called code review now. So it is dedicated to explicitly just give a problem and just get feedback on code reviews. So HackerRank is another tool that I would recommend. So HackerRank is also used in some coding interviews and other things. So that can still be leveraged for code review interviews, I would say.
Got it. Thank you.
Cool. I think we have a question from Darren, if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yes.
Thank you for the speech. Thanks a lot. So how do you manage disagreements during code reviews in your view? So yeah, I think I can speak as my experience as a software engineer, of course, here. So I think, again, and this is a part of everyone's experience again. So I can share my experience here. So generally code reviews, of course, because people of different seniority, coming from different backgrounds, have different experiences, so they won't want to design things in a particular way. So yes, disagreements happen. So what I always try is to back it up with data and facts. So either I refer to documentation and quote that in general to resolve that conflict, or I back it up with data. So usually, like if there are disagreements on performance, that if you do things a particular way, this will be better performance. I always try to back it up with data by doing a POC, for example. Like if I do 10 million this thing 10 million times, would this be real to actual performance? And many times it turns out that what I did is not the best way, and what the recommendation is better. And I think that's another benefit that I think is of code reviews. And again, we have a lot of participation today, so yeah, I think feel free to just share your opinions, others too.
Yes, thank you very much for your answer.
Cool.
Got a questions about, hey.
Okay, please.
Yeah, thank you for your great presentation. I got a questions about how did you guys measure the effectiveness of these code review interviews? For example, probably people in Indeed generally pretty satisfied with the peers code review, like after everyone passing these code review interviews to join Indeed.
Right. So again, I can share the data exact about this, but as a company, we are very data driven, and something that I value a lot about in interviewing in general. So we try to correlate the interview performance with the overall hiring call with data. Like suppose if a person gets a yes in the code review round, do they also get an overall yes, and do they later succeed in their role as well? So yeah, I think we try to correlate it with data about the actual performance, like how does this round correlate with the overall criteria. And I think based on my experience and based on over the top of my head, I think I strongly feel that code review performance is also very indicative of their career maturity. In general, if we are interviewing them for senior levels, they would usually do good at code reviews, is a sense that I have, I think.
I see. Thank you. Very interesting.
I think we have, oh, thank you, Pablo. I think we have another question from Anton.
Cool. So how would you recommend to evaluate the point when the code review could be stopped, when there is a deadline to merge and there are still places for improvement, to not go to perfection indefinitely, especially for not very small PRs that sometimes couldn't be avoided for various reasons? Great questions, actually. So again, yes, there would be cases, like I've personally been through a lot of such cases where not all agreements are resolvable, but then there is a discussion that comes into place. Okay, is this really going to affect something in production? Like, for example, if I don't have linter passing in on code styles, will and there is a deadline that's coming up, will that really break my production? Answer is probably not, but I would do that as a fast follow-up. So our answer there would be that, okay, how much impact this is generating in production if we don't do this? Like, is it going to significantly harm production? So again, it's not an objective call, I would be very honest, for me personally. And I've been involved in such discussions between different folks as a team lead. So that's again some tough calls that people have to take. But usually I have seen that okay, there's a balance, and people, especially when there are deadline pressures, have been understanding in my opinion. But usually the answer is more about, in my view, if I always try to, whenever I try to resolve the discussions, how much impact will this generate if we do this? Like if I were to do like maybe 5 lines of code change for like a lot of significantly better pattern, maybe I would do it. But if I have to do 80% code rewrite for maybe a minor design pattern change that is not giving us any performance or any production benefits, probably not is usually the call. So it's an effort versus cost call most of the times. Yeah, I think again, backed by data is usually where we look at. Cool. So what's your opinion on opening a separate PRs to original PR from others reviewers? I usually discourage that personally, just because I place a lot of emphasis on ownership. So I love when people just feel that, okay, this is their work, this is their code, and it just feels very empowering to me. And it was very empowering to me when folks on my team just gave me that chance, whether when code reviews even are delayed, then they still trusted me and gave me that opportunity for me to grow and learn about that. And that's something I want to ensure that's there in my team. And I want to not do that personally. That's just my opinion. And again, my group has like 35-40 engineers. So I think, yeah, I think giving everyone that chance to grow and just making everyone a 10x engineer is, I think, really, I think this is a very important point that you raised. So I would generally not recommend it, but yeah, I think it totally depends on what the culture is and how usually things have been going. Yeah, I think others, please feel free to just chime in and any thoughts on this one. Okay.
Oh, okay. Neil also had another question. Okay, please go ahead.
I got one more question. So you mentioned about the recalibrate to avoid the human bias. So could you elaborate a little bit more about like how would the calibration looks like? and like what kind of metric or what kind of criteria you are like discussing during the calibration?
Sure. So essentially, I can talk briefly about the calibration process that I've been through at Indeed, and I've heard about on other places based on my peers in different companies too. So what we ensure is that, so for example, at the start, you're not just expected to take interviews, you are just to sit in the interviews to just observe how other people take interviews. And that happens for several interviews, 5 interviews, 10 interviews, where you just observe about how the interview goes. So we usually call that the shadow phase, where you just talk about, and after the interview, you also talk with the lead directly that, hey, and you just note down points essentially that you want to understand how the interview means, what does every question signify, and how can you ask better questions. And you just clarify things like, hey, should we have asked this, or why did we ask this, or how could this have been done better? So you don't interact with the candidate directly, but you just talk with the interviewer outside the room, outside the interview, just observing that piece, just to give you a very strong understanding about what the what the interview expectation is and how the interview is conducted. And once you get familiar, and once you're comfortable that you know the interview very well, then comes the reverse shadow phase, where you take the interview, but then there is a very seasoned person who sits with you next to the room. You are the one who interact with candidates, and this person observes you for many interviews for future, like 5 interviews, 10 interviews again, depending on how you're doing. And after the interview, they provide you feedback about how did your interview go, what could have you improved, what went well, and what did not work well. And only after doing these 10, 15, 20 interviews together with support, only then we ensure that you are ready to go solo after. And we don't do this for just one person. You have multiple seasoned interviews that you observe, because everyone has slight variations in their style, yeah, right? And similarly, there are multiple people who will observe you to give you feedback. And only after going this long, rigorous cycle, you just go solo and interview. And that's usually, and that works for every single interview type, every single thing that we ask at Indeed. That's how we usually train interviewers. Yeah.
Cool. Got it. Thank you.
Cool. Actually, I have a question directly to the previous question that you have answered Ethan's second question about opening a separate PR. Does this kind of question or situation happens in a code review interview? Like this kind of discussion?
Usually no. I think so you are given a PR, and again, because we are just simulating a real code review environment in a code review interview. So it's a code review, you are doing it as a reviewer, and you are just providing your feedback there. We usually don't expect you to code in that interview and just make coding changes. We expect you to, yes, you can provide code snippets to just better explain your point. But usually you're not expected to open a new PR. No, I don't think so.
I see. Okay. Ethan has another opinion. Answer to the next question is. Answer to last question raised a question about personal code ownership vs shared code, where everyone could contribute and there is no unreplaceable people in the team. It's probably kind of.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. So the question is about personal code ownership versus shared code. So if a person owns one piece of the code, then that person is a single point of failure, if I got that right. And yes, I think that's a very valid point, that others won't know what happened. But the expectation is, I feel, and that I've seen working in practice and in my experience there, is that when reviewer reviews your code, they also understand the code. So actually, there are at least 2 people who know about the code. one the author and one the reviewer, assuming there is only one reviewer in the code. Of course, you can have multiple depending on the process. So actually, in my opinion, code review eliminates that single point of failure. And if one of them is not on the team anymore or just leaves the organization, the other person can still take over the reins and just train more people through code reviews itself. But yeah, I think that's yeah. And yeah, I think these are also great points that we also sometimes discuss in the free-form discussions, like, and these are part of your thoughts and code reviews. So these are great points that we have.
Yeah, I think it happens sometimes in our work. How about in your presentation? You also mentioned ownership. How do you measure the ownership of a candidate from a code review interview?
So I think that's a very interesting question. So again, this is a simulated environment, so we don't really know what you do, how do you do in day-to-day life. But I think this comes a lot from the discussions there about their views on code reviews. Like, are they the kind of person who just does the code review and just stops, and whenever there's a feedback that come into picture, or how do they respond to those comments? Like, do they back it up with data, and do they just check out some historical discussions and those kind of things? So those are also some of the discussions we have in the interviews sometimes. Like, what is their thought process about the interview, and how do they do code reviews in general? So I think we get a lot of those things. It's not like, okay, we check for this just like a coding interview. It's very subjective and very free form. In discussions, every code review interview I've taken is different. All the comments are different, every problem is different, every process is different. So I don't think there is a generic answer I can give to that. But yeah, I think usually their process and their way of code reviews is what gives us a hint about their ownership.
Interesting.
And yeah, again, every round has overlapping signals that we wish to collect from other rounds too. So there would be some problem solving signs that we can get from coding rounds. There would be some signals we get from all rounds. And again, all the feedbacks are considered together and all the signals are considered together. So a single interview type is not expected to get every signal out of the candidate. So it's perfectly fine if some interview does not give you every signal, because there would be other interviews to just give those signals.
I see, that makes sense. Okay. Does anyone have other questions? Let's see. Cool. Okay. I think we don't have more questions right now. So that's thank you. Let's thank Vitam for giving us this great talk. And thank you all as well for joining WebHack Meetup. I think that's it for today. Yeah.
Great.
And looking forward to seeing you next time as well. Okay, thank you guys. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.